Picture this. You're standing in the frozen wilderness of Alaska at 2 a.m. The temperature is 20 below zero. Your breath creates clouds in the air. And then, it happens. The sky explodes. Not with fire or thunder, but with colors that shouldn't exist. Green curtains dance across the heavens like silk in an invisible wind. Purple ribbons spiral upward as if someone is painting the night with liquid light. And in that moment, every person who witnesses this phenomenon says the same thing: there has to be a God. I'm speaking to you today from the perspective of one who has watched these lights paint the northern sky for decades. And what I'm about to share with you will change how you see not just the aurora borealis, but how you understand the very fingerprints of the divine across creation. The northern lights aren't just a scientific phenomenon. They're not just pretty colors in the sky. They are the visible signature of the Creator himself, writing his name across the heavens in letters of light that can be seen from space. Today, we're going to journey together into the spiritual reality behind what science calls the aurora borealis. We'll discover why indigenous peoples called them the dance of the spirits. We'll explore what happens in the human heart when it witnesses this divine artistry. And we'll uncover the deeper truth that these lights reveal about the nature of God himself. Because here's what I know after years of studying both the science and the spirituality of these lights. When you truly understand what you're looking at when you see the northern lights, you're not just watching particles collide with atmosphere. You're witnessing the breath of God made visible. Let me tell you what's actually happening up there, because understanding the mechanism makes the miracle even more magnificent. 93 million miles away, our sun is hurling charged particles into space at speeds of over 1 million miles per hour. This solar wind carries the very essence of stellar fire across the vast emptiness of space. When these particles reach Earth, they encounter our planet's magnetic field, an invisible shield that protects all life on this planet. But here's where it gets beautiful. The magnetic field doesn't just block these particles. It guides them. Like a cosmic choreographer, Earth's magnetosphere channels these solar particles toward the polar regions, creating focused streams of energy that dive toward our atmosphere. At altitudes between 60 and 600 miles above Earth, these charged particles begin colliding with oxygen and nitrogen molecules. When oxygen gets excited by this cosmic energy, it glows green and red. When nitrogen joins the dance, it adds blues and purples to the palette. Now, science can explain the how. But science cannot explain the why. Why does this process create beauty instead of chaos? Why do these random particle collisions form organized curtains and spirals that move with rhythm and purpose? Why does every human being who witnesses this phenomenon feel an immediate sense of transcendence? The ancient peoples knew something we've forgotten in our modern world. They understood that what we call natural phenomena are actually supernatural communications. The Inuit called the aurora oxenit, the souls of the dead playing in the sky. The Norse believed they were reflections from the shields of the Valkyries. The Finnish called them revontulet, firefox flames. These weren't primitive superstitions. These were spiritually attuned people recognizing divine activity when they saw it. Think about this. Of all the ways cosmic particles could interact with our atmosphere, they choose to create beauty. Of all the possible outcomes of magnetic field interactions, the result is art. This isn't coincidence. This is signature. When a master painter signs their work, you know immediately who created it. The northern lights are God's signature across the canvas of night, written in colors that don't exist anywhere else in nature with quite the same ethereal quality. And here's what scientists are just beginning to understand. The aurora creates its own sound. Researchers have recorded crackling, whooshing sounds that accompany the visual display. Indigenous peoples have always known this. They've always heard the lights singing. What you're witnessing when you see the northern lights is the visible song of creation itself. The harmony between solar energy, magnetic fields, atmospheric gases, and the gravitational dance of planets all orchestrated to create a symphony of light that speaks directly to the human soul. This is why tears flow down people's faces when they see the aurora for the first time. This is why hardened skeptics find themselves whispering prayers under the dancing lights. Because deep in their spirit, they recognize the voice of their Creator. The scriptures have been telling us about this divine artistry for thousands of years. David wrote in Psalm 19:1, "The heavens declare the glory of God, the skies proclaim the work of His hands." But I want you to really hear what David is saying here. He's not just making a poetic observation. He's revealing a fundamental truth about how God communicates with humanity. The Hebrew word for declare in this verse is safar. It means to recount, to rehearse, to tell thoroughly. The heavens aren't just showing God's glory, they're actively narrating it. They're telling the story of divine power and creativity in a language that transcends human words. When you witness the northern lights, you're not just seeing pretty colors. You're receiving a direct transmission from the throne room of heaven. You're watching the heavens, safar, thoroughly tell you about the nature of your Creator. Look at what happens in Ezekiel's vision of God's glory. "I looked, and I saw a windstorm coming out of the north, an immense cloud with flashing lightning and surrounded by brilliant light. The center of the fire looked like glowing metal, and in the fire was what looked like 4 living creatures. Above the vault over their heads was what looked like a throne of lapis lazuli, and high above on the throne was a figure like that of a man." Ezekiel is struggling to describe divine glory using earthly language. Flashing lightning, brilliant light, glowing metal, colors like lapis lazuli. Sound familiar? He's describing the visual vocabulary that God uses when He wants to manifest His presence in ways human eyes can perceive. The northern lights use this same divine vocabulary. The same supernatural palette. The same otherworldly movement and energy that Ezekiel witnessed in his vision of God's throne. In Job 37-22, we read, "Out of the north He comes in golden splendor. God comes in awesome majesty. The aurora borealis literally comes out of the north in golden splendor." This isn't metaphor, this is prophecy being fulfilled in the night sky every time the lights appear. But here's what I want you to understand on a deeper level. God could have designed our atmosphere to simply absorb solar particles invisibly. The protection would work just as well. The magnetic field could deflect cosmic radiation without creating any visual display whatsoever. But God is an artist. And artists create beauty not because they have to, but because beauty is an expression of their nature. When God said, "Let there be light," He wasn't just creating illumination for practical purposes. He was establishing beauty as a fundamental principle of creation. Light doesn't just help us see, light creates wonder. And the northern lights are light in its most wondrous form. Think about the colors God chose for the aurora. Green, the color of life, growth, and renewal. Red, the color of passion, sacrifice, and divine love. Blue, the color of heaven, peace, and infinite depth. Purple, the color of royalty and divine mystery. These aren't random colors produced by random chemical reactions. These are the colors of God's character painted across the sky in 100-mile-high brushstrokes. In Revelation, John describes his vision of heaven. "At once I was in the Spirit, and there before me was a throne in heaven. A rainbow that shone like an emerald encircled the throne." The same God who surrounds His throne with rainbow light is the same God who paints rainbow light across our polar skies. The northern lights are heaven bleeding through into our earthly realm. They're a preview of the glory that awaits those who know their Creator. When Isaiah saw the Lord high and lifted up, he described seraphim calling to one another, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord Almighty. The whole earth is full of His glory." The whole earth is full of His glory, including the sky above the earth. The aurora borealis is that glory made visible, tangible, undeniable. Every artist has a signature style. Michelangelo's bold, muscular forms. Van Gogh's swirling, emotional brushstrokes. Monet's soft, impressionistic light. God's artistic signature is movement, light, and impossible beauty. Watch the northern lights, and you'll see movement that defies physics. Curtains of light that billow without wind. Spirals that form without rotation. waves that flow without water. This is the movement of the spiritual realm intersecting with the physical realm. I've stood beneath the aurora on over 300 nights, and I can tell you this: no two displays are ever identical. Each aurora is a unique creation, painted fresh from the divine imagination. God doesn't use templates. He doesn't repeat himself. Every light show is an original masterpiece. Think about what this means. The creator of the universe, who spoke galaxies into existence, who maintains the orbit of planets and the dance of stars, still takes time to create original art in our sky. Still choreographs new combinations of light and color and movement just for whoever happens to be watching on any given night. This tells us something profound about God's heart toward humanity. We matter enough to him that he continues creating beauty for us to discover. We're significant enough that he paints the sky with fresh masterpieces every time conditions align. The aurora teaches us about God's nature in ways that sermons sometimes can't. When you watch those lights dance, you're seeing divine joy made visible. When you see the colors shift and change, you're witnessing divine creativity in real time. When you feel that sense of overwhelming awe, you're experiencing what it means to be in the presence of infinite beauty. But here's what moves me most about the Northern Lights: they're completely free. You can't buy a ticket to see them. You can't purchase the experience. They appear according to solar activity and magnetic conditions that no human can control or predict with perfect accuracy. The most spectacular light shows often happen when you least expect them. This is grace on display. Divine gift-giving without strings attached. God doesn't require anything from you to witness his auroral artistry. He doesn't check your spiritual resume before painting the sky. He creates beauty for anyone willing to look up. The aurora reminds us that we serve a God of abundance, not scarcity. A God who creates far more beauty than any human will ever see. Right now, as I speak, the Northern Lights are dancing over uninhabited wilderness, painting masterpieces for an audience of caribou and Arctic foxes. Why? Because God creates beauty for the joy of creation itself. Because artistic expression flows from his very nature. Because he is not just the source of beauty, he is beauty itself. When you understand this about God's character, it changes how you see everything else in creation. The sunset that stops you in your tracks isn't just scattered light, it's God showing off. The flower that blooms in the wilderness where no human eye will see it isn't wasted effort, it's God creating because creating is who he is. The Northern Lights are God's reminder that he is still actively involved in his creation. Still painting. Still creating. Still expressing his nature through light and color and movement that takes our breath away. Let me share with you some encounters I've witnessed over the years, because the aurora doesn't just create visual beauty, it creates spiritual awakening. I remember Sarah, a successful corporate lawyer from Chicago who had traveled to Alaska on what she called her last attempt to find God. She'd grown up in church but had walked away years earlier, convinced that faith was just wishful thinking for people who couldn't handle reality. We were standing outside Fairbanks at 1 a.m. when the lights began. At first, just a faint green glow on the northern horizon. Sarah was checking her phone, complaining about the cold, ready to head back to the hotel. Then the aurora exploded. Curtains of green light erupted from the horizon and spread across the entire sky. Vertical columns of purple and red light began pulsing like cosmic heartbeats. The lights moved with such fluid grace that it looked like heaven itself was dancing. Sarah's phone fell from her hand into the snow. She stood transfixed, tears streaming down her face, whispering, "Oh my God! Oh my God! Oh my God!" Later, she told me, "I've seen art in the greatest museums in the world. I've watched the most spectacular Broadway shows. I've witnessed sunrise over the Grand Canyon. But nothing prepared me for this. There's no way this beauty is an accident. There's no way this artistry exists without an artist." Sarah gave her life to Christ that night under the dancing lights. She said the aurora didn't just show her that God exists, it showed her that God is beautiful beyond imagination. Then there's Marcus, a NASA physicist who came to Alaska as a skeptic, armed with scientific explanations for everything he expected to see. He'd spent his career studying space phenomena and was convinced that understanding the mechanism behind something eliminated any need for wonder. On his third night, we witnessed what locals call a crown aurora, when the lights converge directly overhead, creating the illusion that you're standing inside a dome of pure light. Marcus found himself lying on his back in the snow, staring up at this cosmic cathedral, and something in his scientific worldview cracked open. "I've studied the equations," he told me. "I understand the physics. But equations don't explain why this is so beautiful. Mathematics can describe the process, but mathematics can't account for the artistic vision behind it. Someone composed this. Someone designed this to create awe." Marcus didn't abandon his science that night. He encountered the scientist behind the science. He realized that his equations were simply describing God's methods, not replacing God's presence. I think about Maria, an indigenous Inuit elder who brought her granddaughter to see the lights for the first time. As 3 generations of women stood together under the aurora, Maria began singing in her native language songs her grandmother had taught her about the spirits dancing in the sky. "My ancestors always knew," she told me. "The lights are how the Creator reminds us that the spiritual world is more real than what we see with our everyday eyes. When the lights dance, the veil between worlds becomes thin." Her granddaughter, raised in the digital age, had never seen anything like it. No screen could capture the 3-dimensional depth of the aurora, the way it seems to pulse with life, the way it makes you feel simultaneously small and significant. "Grandma," the little girl whispered, "are those angels?" Maria smiled. "Maybe not angels, child. But definitely the fingerprints of the one who made the angels. These aren't isolated experiences. I've watched hardened oil workers weep under the lights. I've seen teenage skeptics drop to their knees in spontaneous prayer. I've witnessed married couples renew their vows under the aurora, overwhelmed by a beauty that put their love into cosmic perspective. There's something about the northern lights that bypasses the intellectual defenses we build around our hearts. You can't argue with beauty of this magnitude. You can't rationalize away the sense of transcendence that washes over you when heaven's artistry fills your entire field of vision. The aurora creates what I call involuntary worship. Your spirit recognizes something your mind might struggle to accept, that you're in the presence of the divine artist himself. The more I study the northern lights, the more I see profound spiritual symbolism woven into their very nature. Consider the fact that the aurora is only visible in darkness. The most spectacular displays happen during the darkest months of the year, when the Arctic is locked in polar night. You have to leave the artificial lights of civilization behind to witness this natural illumination. This is exactly how spiritual illumination works. We often encounter God's light most clearly during our darkest seasons. When life strips away the artificial securities we've built, when we're forced into the wilderness of uncertainty, that's when heaven's light becomes most visible. The aurora reminds us that darkness isn't the absence of God, it's often the canvas he uses to display his glory most dramatically. Think about the vertical nature of the lights. While most earthly phenomena move horizontally, clouds, rivers, wind, the aurora reaches from earth toward heaven. Those curtains of light are like cosmic ladders, visual prayers ascending to the throne of God. Jacob saw a ladder reaching from earth to heaven with angels ascending and descending. The aurora is that same spiritual reality made visible, the connection between our earthly realm and the heavenly realm above. The colors themselves carry deep spiritual significance. Green, the dominant color of most auroras, is the color of life and growth. Every time you see those green curtains dancing in the sky, you're seeing a visual reminder that our God is the God of life. He doesn't just create life, he celebrates it, decorates it, makes it beautiful. Red aurora, which appears during the most intense solar storms, represents the fire of God's presence. When Moses encountered God in the burning bush, when the Holy Spirit descended as tongues of fire at Pentecost, when Isaiah's lips were touched with coal from heaven's altar, this divine fire is the same energy that paints red light across the polar sky. Blue and purple aurora speak of God's royal nature. These colors appear at the highest altitudes, closest to space itself. They remind us that our God is the King of the universe, ruling from the highest heights, painting his royal colors across the dome of heaven. But here's what astounds me most about the aurora's symbolism: the lights appear to dance. Dancing is an expression of joy, celebration, freedom. The northern lights don't just shine, they celebrate. They move with rhythm and grace that suggests cosmic joy. This is the joy of creation itself, the delight of the Creator in his handiwork. When David danced before the Lord with all his might, he was expressing the same kind of abandoned celebration that we see in the aurora. The lights dance because they're reflecting the joy of their Creator. The aurora also teaches us about timing. You can't schedule a light show. You can't demand that the lights appear on your timeline. Solar activity follows its own cosmic rhythm, and the aurora appears according to conditions beyond human control. This is a powerful lesson about divine timing. God's most spectacular displays of power and beauty often come when we least expect them, but exactly when we most need them. The aurora teaches patience, teaches us to watch and wait for God's perfect timing rather than demanding his miracles on our schedule. And consider this: the aurora is both predictable and mysterious. Scientists can forecast general aurora activity based on solar weather, but they can't predict the exact forms the lights will take, the specific colors that will appear, or the precise choreography of each display. This perfectly mirrors our relationship with God. We can know his character, study his patterns, understand his nature through Scripture, but we can never fully predict or control how he'll manifest his presence in our lives. There's always mystery, always surprise, always beauty beyond our expectations. The northern lights are God's reminder that he is both knowable and unknowable, both intimate and infinite, both scientifically observable and spiritually mysterious. After decades of studying both the science and spirituality of the northern lights, I believe they carry a specific message to humanity. A message we desperately need in our modern world. First, the aurora reminds us to look up. We live in a culture obsessed with looking down at our phones, our problems, our immediate circumstances. We've become experts at examining the microscopic details of our daily lives while missing the cosmic perspective that puts everything in context. The northern lights can only be seen by those who lift their eyes to the heavens. You can't witness this divine artistry while staring at a screen. You have to step outside, look up, and remember that you're part of something infinitely larger than your personal concerns. When you see those lights dancing hundreds of miles above your head, your problems don't disappear, but they find their proper proportion. You remember that the God who paints masterpieces across the sky is also the God who cares about the smallest details of your life. Second, the aurora teaches us about divine extravagance. God doesn't do anything halfway. When he decides to create a light show, he doesn't settle for a single candle, he illuminates the entire sky. When he chooses to demonstrate his artistry, he doesn't paint a small canvas, he uses the heavens themselves as his studio. This tells us something crucial about God's heart toward us. He doesn't give us just enough beauty to get by. He doesn't provide just adequate wonder. He creates beauty on a scale that overwhelms us, that leaves us gasping, that reminds us we serve a God of abundance beyond imagination. If God is this extravagant with temporary displays in our polar skies, how much more extravagant will he be in the eternal glory he's preparing for those who love him? Third, the aurora reminds us that we are witnesses. Not everyone gets to see the northern lights. Most of the world's population lives too far south to witness this phenomenon. If you've seen the aurora, you've been given a gift that most humans never receive. But gifts come with responsibility. When you witness divine artistry on this scale, you become a messenger. You carry the responsibility to tell others what you've seen, to bear witness to the beauty and power and creativity of our God. The aurora doesn't photograph well. No camera can capture the three-dimensional depth, the fluid movement, the way the lights seem to pulse with life. The only way to truly share the aurora is through testimony, through telling others what you've experienced in the presence of divine beauty. Finally, The aurora is a promise. In Revelation, John tries to describe the New Jerusalem. The city does not need the sun or the moon to shine on it, for the glory of God gives it light. The nations will walk by its light, and the kings of the earth will bring their splendor into it. The northern lights are a preview of that coming glory. They're a glimpse of what it will be like when God's light is no longer filtered through atmosphere and magnetic fields, but shines directly from His presence. Every aurora is God's way of saying, this is just the beginning. What you're seeing now is a shadow of the glory that's coming. If you think this is beautiful, wait until you see me face to face.